Hey guys, Sean from Top 5 Fit, and today I'd like to go over some exercises involving only bands for the lower body. Now, first of all, before we start into anything, these are a good idea. You want to try and find these. Obviously, we sell them on our site. This is a #1 resistance band. It's about 20-25 pounds worth of resistance at tension, which means here is where you start feeling 25 pounds of resistance. The nice thing about these is the further you stretch them, the harder they get. So that variable resistance can actually add a really, really nice touch to muscle firing and control while you're doing the exercises. So this is a good idea. If you don't always have time to make it to the gym, you can't always recreate some of your favorite exercises. These give you a lot of versatility in the home. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at a couple exercises that ultimately just involve these. So let's get started. Okay, the first exercise we want to take a look at is hip adduction. Now, I know if you've been into a large box gym facility type, you've seen these machines. They're basically the leg spreaders. Sometimes kind of awkward to make eye contact with people on, so don't do that. But that's not a movement that's easily recreated in the home until now. So basically all we need is a couple of #1 bands and a chair to sit in. So we'll start off with #1 band. You want to find a low anchor point, which we've already attached these to here on either side, and make sure that the chair is positioned in, fairly the center. Okay. Go ahead and have a seat in the chair. You're going to want to obviously hold on to one side or one band so that you can attach it appropriately. Now, right off the bat, in just about every video we've done, you don't see me wearing shoes. Now, that's a personal thing. I just don't wear shoes. It's my place and I don't have to. These rubber bands are not that forgiving, so if you do have sensitive feet, you might want to make sure you have shoes on in the beginning, but for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and put them on my feet. 2 positions that you can go after. One is all the way around the ankle like so. So ideally, this is one of the more stable positions, but I like to involve the feet, of course, in everything that I do, so I have a tendency to put that band right through the arch of the foot. So we'll do the same thing on the other side. Reach, put together, right through the arch of the foot. Now, to keep the bands in place, obviously I'm going to want to make sure that the toes stay pointed forward at all times. Scoot forward in your chair, ultimately this so that your sit bones are right on the edge. Because ideally we're going to pick the legs up, extend them parallel to the ground, and then start our adduction. So, hold on to the sides of the chair, whatever you need to do to keep yourself feeling stable. Straighten the legs out as far as you can, and then go ahead and draw them together. Again, if they're around your feet, you want to make sure and keep the toes pointed straight ahead so the band doesn't come flying off. Okay, a couple of things to note about this exercise, because obviously with the bands creating a bit of instability, there's ways to screw this up. We want to try not to do that. So right off the bat, you want to make sure that your legs are straight and your toes are pointed. Even on the machines, I have a tendency to see people with their knees out and they're almost putting more pressure on the bottom of their feet to bring the bands in. And that's not exactly using your gracilis, your groin, as efficiently as you could. So you want to try to make sure that the legs are straight so you can get a clean contraction instead of partially bent and you're trying to squeeze the feet. There's a difference there. Now you're just putting pressure in your hips, and it's not a very good position for your hips to be in while you're applying that pressure. So you want to make sure that the toes are forward and the feet are down and the legs are straight. So that last exercise was hip adduction, adduction. Let's go ahead and take a look at the second resistance band exercise for lower body, seated calf raises. So now, in my facility, I had these bars actually welded and created just for activities like this. When you are at home, you basically just need something that you can anchor a band to up underneath the balls of your feet. So if you've got a piece of PVC sitting around, or even a block, just something so that you can actually drop your heels down low enough to feel a stretch in your Achilles and your soleus and your gastroc, as well as get them up high enough to place some resistance on the band. But for now, we're going to go ahead and just use the bars that I had fabricated for this place. So this is a #3 resistance band. This is about 50 pounds worth of resistance. They run about $20. I've got a whole bunch of them, and basically what we're going to do is take this band and place it right up underneath the bar that I've got anchored to the floor. Okay, so again, I don't wear shoes. If you need to wear shoes, you wear shoes, but the majority of the pressure is going to be on the balls of the feet. So you need to kind of assess that to make sure you're not creating damage from exercises like this. So ideally, you're going to fold the band in half, and then you want both sides in your hands. Place the balls of your feet on the bar, and then we're going to pull the band up until it's over top of the knees. Now, right away, you'll notice that the band has a tendency to want to draw your knees in towards each other. Try not to let that happen. We want to actively keep the knees apart, which means we're going to fire the glutes just a little bit for stabilization in the position. Even though they really don't have anything to do with the exercise, it's just good posture to keep your knees slightly spread apart. Balls of the feet, enough pressure so that you can drop the heels down and feel the pull all the way in the Achilles up into the calf. And then we're just going to push through the heels and the balls of the feet up into the band until we feel that contraction all the way up into the calf. And then down. Some variations you can do with this exercise are the exact same variations that you could do with a standing calf raise machine or a seated calf raise machine, in which you can invert or evert your toes. So eversion, we're turning the toes in. Sorry, that's inversion. Eversion, we're turning the toes out. So to emphasize the medial sides of the calves of the gastroc, we turn the toes out. Same movement, push up into the band and then relax. To emphasize the lateral sides, turn the toes in. A couple of common mistakes with this exercise: not emphasizing the negative enough. When you're in this position, the band's already pulling you down towards the ground, and you're constantly fighting the resistance of the band because it's always pulling on you. So things tend to fatigue pretty quickly. So you want to make sure that you're emphasizing the negative portion of the movement. So positive being, we come up into the contraction, try not to let the band just jerk you back down to the ground. You want to make sure and take the same count that you did for the positive for the negative. That way you know you're getting the most out of the exercise and you're actually strengthening the tissue instead of just letting it drop down like that. Okay, that about wraps it up for seated calf raises with the band. Let's take a look at high hamstring extensions. This is a great exercise for endurance athletes or even people that like to deadlift kind of heavy. It hits the origin point of the hamstrings, which can get irritated and can be difficult to actually work on, but this is a great one for that. High ham extensions are, again, a great way to kind of focus on that origin point of the hamstrings, obviously starting up in the sits bone and then running all the way down to behind the knee. A lot of times ham curls don't always get to that point, and even deadlifts, unless you're doing RDLs, a stiff-legged deadlift, they're very difficult to get at. This is a real easy way to make sure that you're working that tissue and keeping it strong and ready for whatever activity you want to engage in. We're going to go ahead and use a number 2 band for this. These are basically right in between, obviously, the 1 and the number 3, but you're looking at about 30, 35 pounds of resistance. Again, my facility is designed for the activities that I like to put my clients through, so, and again, I had this cage built for this place. But you want to find a place to anchor your band at fairly waist height, because we're going to be laying down on the floor. If you are in a large facility, large gym type facility, the power racks or the squat racks would work just fine. So start off by taking your band, and we're just going to add a slip knot, pull it tight, and again, make sure you leave yourself enough room on either side so that when you get in position, you're not banging into any other of the bars. Go ahead and have a seat. Make sure your head is right up underneath the attachment point of the band. You don't want to be off to the right or left because then you'll put undue stress on one side over the other, and we're trying to keep the resistance as even as possible. Take one foot, you're going to go up and put the arch right through the band, keeping the toe up towards the ceiling. Grab onto the bottom of the cage, in this case the bars that I have. Scoot yourself out so that ultimately with a straight leg, there's tension on the band so there's no slack, and you feel a slight stretch in the hamstring. You want to be at about 90 degrees. This is where we start. You want to try to make sure you're not out too far and keeping your hips and pelvis on the ground. If you're scooting out too much and you find yourself bringing your toe back over your head and your pelvis is actually tucking, you're too far. You want to come back just far enough that you can keep your hips down, legs straight. Now, you want to maintain a bit of a soft knee here. Try not to hyperextend through the joint. Keep it slightly bent, just enough to maintain pressure on the hamstring only. And what we're going to do is take this straight leg all the way down to the ground, tap the heel, bring it back up nice and controlled to that 90-degree position. Okay, a couple of don'ts with this exercise. Again, working with a resistance band, people have a tendency to just forget about the negative and let the band put them back into the starting position. So what you don't want to do is a nice clean contraction and then let it whip your leg and hip up off of the ground. So try to make sure that you're controlling that negative the same way you do the positive. The other issue is making sure that the knee is bent just enough to actually maintain a stretch on the hamstring, but not so much that you're basically using nothing but your glute now. Okay, the idea is focusing on the portion of the hamstring, where it starts, and making sure that we're actually getting good work in that area. If you bend your knee too much, you're moving more into the belly of the hamstrings and you're not getting what you're supposed to be getting out of the exercise. So try to keep that leg fairly straight, but again, soft knee, making sure that the hamstring is actually doing the work. Next exercise we're going to take a look at is standing hip flexion. Now, this muscle group has a tendency to get lumped in with a bunch of other muscle groups. So, your lower abdominal, your quadriceps have a tendency to kind of do a lot of the work for your hip flexors sometimes, and it's difficult to actually isolate them. This is a real easy way to kind of just get at the hip flexors as long as you're maintaining your posture, keeping your body position where it's supposed to be. You don't necessarily want to think a lot of resistance with this exercise too. The heavier the band, the more the larger muscle groups will have a tendency to override, and the idea is we're basically trying to focus on the tissue between here and here, and that's it. We don't necessarily want a whole lot of help from anything else, so keep the resistance band fairly small. We're going to use a number 1, and you want to find a nice low point to anchor it at. Step your foot inside the band, right around the ankle, and step up just to the point where the band's at tension. You want to make sure that your chest is up and your back is straight. If you've got any flexion in your torso or in your hips, again, you're going to use those larger muscle groups and you're basically taking the work off of the hip flexors, which is what we're not trying to do. So, good posture, nice and straight. You may even want to find something to hold on to help. Don't necessarily hike your foot all the way up off of the ground so far that your posture is off. You just want just enough clearance so that you can actually bring the foot forward and then bring it back even with the other foot. So slightly forward, making sure to only use the hip flexor and bring it back. All right, a couple of things you want to note about this exercise to make sure it's effective. Again, we talked about posture, making sure that you're up nice and straight so that you're only utilizing the hip flexors to get that leg forward. The other thing you want to make sure you're not out too far. If we're all the way out here and I don't have anything to stabilize myself with, you're going to get pulled back, then basically the upper body goes into flexion. And you're going to spend more time balancing and fighting the band than actually working. So again, focus on just enough tension so that when you're at full contraction there, you've got enough resistance, but it's not taking you off of your feet. Last but not least, knee extensions. Now, traditionally, you would need a very large piece of equipment to do knee extensions and a whole bunch of plates to stack on top of them. Well, I've kind of figured out a way to get this exercise done and have it be just as effective as anything you would see in a large facility. Start off with your number 1 band anchored to a low point, slip knot fashion, and then you're going to want to get back far enough. Now, before we do anything, we want to get the band obviously attached to the foot. So, pinch and leave a loop, and then all you want to do is throw that loop over top of the pinched point. grab the two bands that are in the middle, and now you've got another slip knot here. You're just going to take that slip knot and go right over top of your foot so that ultimately the knot itself gathers up right in the arch, okay? Scoot back just far enough, again, so that the band is at tension. Hands grab behind the knees, and this is to help keep the upper leg perpendicular to the floor at all times. This is important because you want to maintain tension on the quadriceps and not make it easy. You want as much benefit out of the resistance as you can get. So, keeping the toe up, we're going to start to extend at the knee and straighten that leg out, not letting it pull forward, keeping it perpendicular to the floor, and then right back to the starting position. Okay, hope you liked the video. 5 exercises right there that can replace big gym equipment, big gym machine type exercises. Lower body in nature, of course, adduction, knee extensions, seated calf raises, hip flexors. These are all things that you'll use in not just everyday life, but every sport imaginable. So hopefully this helped out. If you like the information, feel free to comment. If there's something you want us to go over, leave that in the comment box as well, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks.